I think an easy way to look at other sacrifices being made by Americans during this time is to broaden our scope a little bit, right? Let's not just talk about ethnic minorities, a small section of our population. Let's expand that. And let's take a look at Americans as a whole. And what we'll see is that Americans are going to have to change how our economy works, right? I mean, we're an economy that's in 1940, not one that's actually building and running for war. Instead, what we have is an economy that is actually functioning as one for regular, everyday society. And so what we want to do here is totally reconvert our economy into something that is going to essentially really become a war machine. So we'll take a look at a couple things here as we see Americans making sacrifices, giving up what their everyday economy looks like, and instead embracing a couple of different things, like something called the cost-plus economy, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and really seeing how that looks in terms of nuts and bolts with the kinds of things that we produce, no longer producing refrigerators and cars, but instead producing bombers and ships. So we'll see what that looks like here as we see these kind of old ideas and ways of living kind of given up, sacrificed, so that we can see women in the workforce. We can see the Depression finally coming to an end. We can see Americans kind of break these work barriers that kind of separate them in the workplace as white or black or Hispanic or woman or man. So let's delve into some of these details, because we know that our economy needs to convert itself into a war machine. And really, when it does this, you are going to see the American economy as a war machine really put an end to the Great Depression, which is a great thing. But how do we do that? And the answer is going to be something called the cost-plus system. And it's definitely going to speed up war production because it's going to encourage factories to make a lot of war products as quick as it can. Let me show you how that works. The government's going to come to your factory, let's say, and it's going to give you a contract, a cost-plus contract, and it's going to pay you to make something, whatever that war thing is. And let's say you're going to make tanks, right? And the government is going to buy the tanks that you make at a small profit. So here's one tank that you've made in your company, and it's going to give you a small profit. Well, why is that going to encourage me to keep making tanks if it's all I'm going to get is a small profit? That's not something I'm going to want to do, right? Well, let's zoom in and look at the details. That tank that you made, well, that tank is made up of all kinds of things, right? Like copper and steel and fuel and rubber. Not only is the government going to buy your tank for a small profit, it's also going to pay for your costs to produce that tank. So all of these things right here and all of these costs, the government's going to pay for them. In other words, you don't have costs. All you get is profit. So what would seem like a small profit actually becomes a big profit because you don't have any costs. This is something that many companies see as a huge advantage. So they're going to convert their war factory or their factories into war production. Hi guys, people visiting us here. Take a look, everybody. Look, see? Some visitors. Everyone say hi. Yeah. All right, so they're going to convert their factories into war production. And we're going to see that in terms of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, that old World War II Depression era organization that was trying to lend money to businesses. Still doing that, but now saying, hey man, now make us those tanks, now make us those guns, those socks, those uniforms, whatever it is that our economy needs. Specific examples could come from the automotive industry, for instance, where the B-24 bomber is made by Henry Ford. He converts his factories into assembly lines for planes like this bomber here, the Liberator. Instead of making cars, now his assembly lines are efficient at making those kinds of planes. Boom. Mind blown. We're going to see Americans revolutionize the way they make their products, like when our ships, Liberty ships right here, when our ships are sunk by German submarines at a pace that we can't necessarily overcome. We're going to change that for example, by building ships across the country in places like Oklahoma and Nebraska, where there's no water at all. And instead, what we'll see are individual factories making small components of a ship. So what we see maybe is this factory in Mississippi makes a part, and this factory over here in Alabama makes a part, in Oklahoma and Nebraska. And each factory ships it to the coast, where it's assembled in Norfolk, Virginia, for instance, and put into the water. This can take the amount of time it would handle us to build a ship from 244 days down to 41. We completely revolutionize the way our economy operates. We make it so much more efficient. Part of that process of increased efficiency is recognizing that as an economy, what we need is everyone working in our factories, including women, large numbers of women, known as Rosie the Riveters. These women who come to factories, like my grandma Genevieve, they come to factories and they work on whatever it is that factory is making, because the men have been drafted and are off fighting overseas in Europe or overseas in the Pacific. And these women work in the millions to help our war economy take off. You're going to see Rosie the River, this character from a song. She's going to become a symbol of this. And I'm sure you've seen it, these posters. We can do it. As women take up whatever tools are required to make war materials. And even racism, which would keep African Americans or Hispanics or Japanese Americans out of working in war factories, is overcome when FDR creates the Employment Practices Commission to end discrimination in defense contracts, in defense industries, so that we can get as many Americans as possible working in our war economy. As a result, war production takes off. And you can see it here. Up, whether it's aircraft, whether it's ships, whether it's tanks, production goes up. Tomorrow in class, we'll talk about why, after this year, production seems to decline. I wonder why that is. Put that in your little nugget for later. Oh, and by the way, hey, do me a favor. When you come into class tomorrow, just put a little smiley face on a piece of paper and hand it to me. And don't tell anyone else that you got it from this video, because we want to be sure they're listening. And if you're one of the ones who has listened, I say thanks. Don't tell those people who haven't what's going on. Remember, smiley face in my hand so I can high five you. Oh, and put your name on it too, okay? Thanks.